Welcome to Sunrise Extra on this Friday Eve, otherwise known as Thursday. We like to call it Friday Eve because we're that much closer to the weekend. We have a very important and special show for you this morning. We want you to join the conversation. Joining us this morning is Emmy Ritter. Give us a wave, Emmy. She is the Executive Director of Raphael House, the domestic violence shelter here in Portland. And also joining us is Angelia and her daughter Destiny. They actually spent time in the shelter and they're going to tell us their story. They say it changed their life. Such an important topic. Emmy, I want to start with you because we have been talking about here at KGW that domestic violence during COVID, we're seeing those numbers rise. What do we know about the prevalence here in the Portland metro area? How big a problem is it during this pandemic?
Us on, and you know, the pandemic has been a perfect storm. Here we have two major public health issues, one exacerbating another. And locally, we initially saw a real surge in reports of domestic violence early on in that the winter of the pandemic. And when we started sheltering in place, calls to the hotline fell off because survivors really had a hard time finding a safe way to contact resources. They began losing those regular contacts that they have, schools, jobs, doctor's appointments, sort of fell away as they did for all of us because we didn't have that kind of contact. Those are the traditional avenues that survivors usually can access help and be able to get referrals to our programs. Not to mention the emotional support and safety. Since springtime and through now, our local crisis lines, ours as well as Call to Safety, have noticed call level volumes showing the situations have been much more dangerous. And so the safety planning has been much more intense. I would want to add that when survivors normally turn to family, friends, and neighbors for safety or for escape, they now have to make a really hard decision between the two safety issues, one being safety from the virus and the other from safety from violence.
We want to bring our other guests into the mix here as well, but and Brenda has a question for them. But I think what's most important here is to pass along that 24-hour domestic violence hotline that you offer. And can you do that right now for us, Emmy?
Yeah, our hotline is 503-222-6222. We're one of a number of different hotlines in the community. I would like to add Call to Safety, which is our main community hotline number, which is 503-235-5333.
Okay, we're happy to pass those along. Angelia, I want to ask you, because I know you have been very open about sharing your personal story. Can you give us an idea of what was going on in your life before you and Destiny arrived at Raphael House?
So we had just left another state when our abuser had gone to jail. And so we had come to Oregon and we were attempting to start a new life. We had been homeless in the car, didn't really have a lot of resources here in the state of Oregon, didn't really have a whole lot of family or anything to turn to. So after almost 2 full weeks and a very scary interaction with a police officer and the threat of losing my children to the system, we really increased our efforts in attempting to find shelter space. We were so incredibly lucky after going to the Women's Resource Center when they helped us to secure a location at the Raphael House.
Angelia and Destiny, you guys are both so brave for coming on here this morning to share your story, because a lot of times we want to share the story of a great resource like Raphael House, and it's often best to hear from people that benefit from what they do.
Yep.
A lot of times those people aren't willing to share their story in public. We get it, we understand, but you guys have done that for us here this morning. So tell us about that experience. What were you able to learn? What did you get out of your experience with Raphael House?
I think that the main thing that we got out was number one, it wasn't our fault. It wasn't my fault. That domestic violence looks different. There are a lot of different types of domestic violence. I didn't even realize that that was a thing. And learning that I had value. I knew that my children had value. I had started to make those decisions when the abuse kind of changed and was directed towards more than just me. And so, but it really, Raphael House really gave me the tools to help educate my children, help educate myself, and really cemented the fact that I was worth it. I'm worth it.
Destiny, can you tell me what you remember about going into the shelter at first? I can't quite imagine all the different emotions you must have been feeling. How old were you when you arrived there?
Yeah, well, I was only 8 years old, I'm pretty sure, and we had just recently moved to Oregon, so even just being in a different state was a scary experience, and then being put into an environment where, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know if there were going to be other children there. It was really scary, but it was one of the best decisions that my mom has ever made, and I know that we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for that decision. But
were there other kids there? Did you make some connections while you were in transition? There was staff there to support kids, and there were other kids there that could, you could talk to and be friends with. And, it was a place that really showed me as a kid that I didn't have to be alone, and I didn't have to isolate myself. And it was, safe to talk to other people and create friendships.
We definitely want to bring Emmy back in here in a moment, but we also have these fantastic guests, Destiny and Angelia. And Angelia, as a survivor, I think you could share your story, because a lot of people would look at the situation and go, if they've never been in an abusive relationship, they'd say, geez, if I ever got involved in one, I'd get out just as quickly as I got in. Can you explain maybe why it's not always that easy and how you managed to get out when you did?
Well, domestic violence, it's not typically, at least in my experience, it's not something that just happens overnight. It is, at least in my experience, it was a process that by the time you're in it, you don't even really fully understand how you're in it, and you've made so many excuses, and you've changed so many things about yourself and your life to adapt to the situation that you're in, that it doesn't. You don't even really realize, like I said, I didn't even realize I was in a domestic violence relationship until the abuse began to affect my children. So it's I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, because like I said, I think some people don't recognize how you can get into that. It's not something you walk into, like you said. Sometimes it develops over whether it's months or years, and you're in the thick of it before you realize what you're in.
It really is an insidious situation oftentimes. You guys, I'm looking at my phone, because one of the things that we love about Sunrise Extra is that people can hop online and ask questions and make comments. So I have one off the top, Angelia and Destiny. One of our regulars, Jennifer Taft, good morning to you, Jen. She says, thank you so very much. It's hard to share the hardest points in one's life, but I think it's so important to do that. And you guys are helping other families, other people when you step forward. I mean, we cannot say enough this morning how courageous that is and how much we appreciate you and stand by you. I do want to bring Emmy back, because when a lot of people think of Raphael House, they think of that emergency shelter. But Emmy, if you could give us some idea of the other resources that you provide to families that come into your shelter. Angelia touched on the education point. Like, you helped her expand her world and understand her worth. But just kind of give me a brief overview of what people can expect when they walk through your doors.
Yeah. First, I want to say it is like an incredible honor to be on this screen with Angela and Destiny. I've known them for 10 years, and it's really been incredible to watch their journey through this whole thing. And they've gotten to access all those programs, starting from that very first moment when they were in crisis in the most dangerous time, and other families come into our shelter at that most dangerous time when they're escaping an abuser. While they're in shelter, we engage with them wholeheartedly, helping folks follow their dreams and hopes, and until they can get into safe and stable housing themselves. We at that point get to wrap around them with what we call our advocacy center, which is our follow-up services. Current and past shelter residents have access to this. There's activities for both the youth as well as adult support groups, wellness events, and individualized follow-up services. We have another program that is attached to our shelter, as well as the other shelters here in the Portland metro area, that we call Shelter to Stability, which helps survivors move out of shelter by reducing the financial barriers that keep them from finding that new safe home. In addition to that, there's a mentor group that helps survivors who are learning about what it means to have their own place, deal with landlords, budgeting, all those things. It's some training and education from people who have been through it. So it's a really exciting way to have peer-to-peer support. We have another peer-to support program called our Domestic Violence Recovery Mentor Program, which is the first of its kind in Oregon. It's survivor-led, a peer support program for any survivor in Multnomah County who are experiencing both domestic violence as well as substance abuse or addiction. We have two other really incredible programs that I'm so proud of. One is we have confidential health advocacy that's embedded in healthcare settings. It's with the OHSU clinic. So when a doctor or provider identifies that there's potentially domestic violence or abuse in a home, they could instantly refer to one of our advocates. And again, that's one of those pieces that it's a safety net for survivors out in the community. Finally, what we're always trying to do is prevent violence before it even happens. We have a prevention education program in both middle and high schools. So we get to reach these students as well as the entire school community, helping both the teaching staff, the parents, as well as the students learn about safe and equitable relationships.
Wow, that's great.
That's Raphael House in a nutshell.
Emmy Ritter joining us this morning, the executive director of Raphael House. A lot of times I think when we picture domestic abuse, we often picture women and wives like Angelia and kids like Destiny. I was curious though this morning if you also have programs or if you also serve men in the community.
I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, we are gender inclusive. All of our programs, anybody that identifies as a survivor of domestic violence are welcome into all of our programs.
Okay. There's the hotline again.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put that up. It is 24/7. There is language support, 503-222-6222. Drew, years ago, I remember I got a phone call back in the newsroom when I was working, and there was a woman on the other end of the line. She was a KGW viewer, and she was in a domestic abuse situation. And she considered me a familiar face, and she wanted to tell me her story. And I had the information about Raphael House, and I was able to connect her to that shelter. And that is just one of many, many stories in our community that really does show how Raphael House is that kind of wraparound service. Really, it's like a big old hug for families who come in there to really get them in transition and on their way. And speaking of transitions, Angelia and Destiny, I'll start with you, Angelia, but Destiny, I really want you to weigh in too. You told us about your low moments when you arrived at Raphael House, but what are you guys doing now? How is life for you two? Angelia, I'll start with you.
Yeah, we have struggles just like everyone else, but those struggles are are without violence. And so that is huge. We also know, and this is probably the most important thing, is for me anyway, it was really hard. I felt very alone for a very, very long time. But since going to the Raphael House, that alone feeling is gone. I know that there are people that will advocate for me, will support me, will listen to me, will empathize with me, will help me find a way out of, whatever predicament I might be in. I unfortunately lost a lot of time in figuring out how to be an adult, how to be an effective parent, because I was in that type of situation. But I have learned, along with the help of Raphael House, I have learned how to be the best person I can be, and how to be the best parent I can be, and how to continue to live a life free of domestic violence.
Angelia, I think we can call you a hero, because not only did you pull yourself out of this relationship, but seriously, but you got your kids out of that situation. And wow, you're making me get emotional here. Bring it back to Emmy real quick, because I'm not the expert, Emmy, but you are. I'm wondering if you have studies that show, or numbers that support the idea that kids that grow up in these domestic violence situations will oftentimes wind up in those same situations themselves as adults, because I think that maybe, Angelia, you kept your kids from growing into that same situation that you did. But hopefully maybe Emmy has the numbers or the studies there in front of her that show that that's true or not.
Well, I'm going to apologize. I don't have actually statistics, but there are, there has been a lot of research around this over the many years. I think what we know is that people can feel not know their worth, as Angelia was talking about, when they grow up in a domestic violence situation, and that type of abuse and power and control that an abuser can inflict on a family feels quote unquote normal. So they may not know what a regular relationship looks like. That said, people that have very safe homes can also be manipulated by abusers who are very charismatic and come across with as really safe and exciting, wonderful partners. Angelia said it beautifully, that it isn't something that happens in one moment. It's a pattern of systemic power and control that sometimes you don't realize it when you're deep in it. It takes a long time to figure that out. So children that are growing up in it have options and opportunities, and it's, I'll just circle back to the fact that it's so wonderful when we have programs for families, for kids to learn that there are safe adults out there, and that relationships can look like respectful, equal, consensual relationships.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be what they may have grown up in.
Emmy, before we let everybody go, we have to talk about Raphael House's virtual gala tonight. Last year, and I've been involved with Raphael House, I've honestly lost count. It's got to be 20 plus years that I've been helping with this. Of course, COVID, we can't gather in person right now, but the fundraiser is absolutely critical for awareness and also to raise money to keep these programs going. All the mentoring, all the health care, all the emergency shelter needs. So when people engage with the virtual gala, they are engaging and helping people like Angelia and Destiny and so many others who need that grace at a difficult moment in their lives. So Emmy, tell me a little bit about when people can find the fundraiser and some of the things that are going to be going on tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. I'm so excited to see you tonight. It's going to be a great event. So bidding is already up on our website, and you could access that at www.raphaelhouse.com. You saw it on the invite that they just put up. Our pre-show starts at 6:30 tonight, so you can start seeing some entertainment and see what some of those auction items are. And the event actually starts from 7 and it ends at 8. It's going to be recorded, so if that's late for you, that's fine. You'll be able to tune in afterwards. And the bidding stays open to bid on some amazing, fun items. Stays open until Saturday. The event itself is going to show a behind-the-scenes look at Raphael House. You'll be able to see some of Shelter, which we usually can't do because of the confidential nature of our location. And there's going to be some amazing, powerful stories similar to Angelia and Destiny's at the event. So I hope many of you tune in. It's going to be really exciting.
Big thanks this morning to, for starters, Emmy, you, the executive director at Raphael House, doing that great work for people in our community, and then Angelia and Destiny, the mother-daughter duo who were so brave to come on this morning and share their story of survival here. Why don't we throw up that hotline, Brian Matthews, to end today's Sunrise Extra, because Raphael House does offer this 24-hour domestic abuse hotline. If you ever are in a situation and you need help, you can call that number right there, 503-222-6222. Raphael House, Brenda, you know them as well as anyone here in the newsroom. They've been doing this great work for so many years, and we thank them for continuing that work. You can help them out through their virtual auction tonight.
Yeah, love you guys. Thank you so much for watching the stream. Have a good day, everyone.